Just going to make a video on the topic of ITP, or idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, because I saw a case of this week. What is ITP? To understand what ITP is, you first of all got to understand what a platelet is, because the purpura in ITP, purpura is a medical term for bruise. So if you got bruising, you got purpura. If you got a love bite, you got purpura. They're purple bruise. The platelets are little gluey sort of cells that, I don't even know if they're cells, they're fragments of cells. They're made by megakaryocytes, I think, and they float around in the blood system, and they act like, if you get a cut or trauma or whacked or whatever, the blood vessels get squashed, they start to leak, and this is like immediately available, like super glue, to glue up the walls of the blood vessels so they don't leak. There's two parts of the clotting system in the body. There's the platelets, which does that initial thing, and then there's the they go from factor 1 to factor 12. People have probably heard of haemophilia. Haemophilia is a completely different clotting disorder to a platelet disorder. Haemophilia is to do with the chain of coagulation, which results in, well, I don't want to get too technical, but it results in a chemical in the blood called fibrinogen being converted into fibrin, which is like, it's like plastering a whole lots of bit of spaghetti and sticking them all together over any fractures in the blood vessel, or indeed to form a clot anywhere. So if you cut a vein or an artery, it's going to eventually clot, because if you pull a tooth out, it's going to eventually clot, because you're going to get a deposition of fibrin, which is like plaster on plasterboard. It like just clags up the blood vessel and stops it bleeding. So that's the other blood system. That's not the one we're talking about here. We're talking about platelets. ITP is a autoimmune disease. Autoimmune is really when the body attacks itself, and they're very common autoimmune diseases and very hard to understand. But basically with ITP, what happens is the platelets get destroyed because the body has developed an immune response to the cells that make the platelets. So it's attacking its own factories that make platelets. Usually ITP occurs as an autoimmune disease in young teenagers. They're usually otherwise healthy. They just present with bruising and petechiae, which are little blood spots everywhere. They might have nosebleeds. They might have bleeding from the gums. Quite scary, because people think they've got leukemia, but it shows up straight away on a blood test. Your platelet level will be low to extremely low. If it gets too low, you have to go to hospital and have a platelet infusion. But it's usually self-limiting and does get better. But if your platelet levels are low and there's a danger of you bleeding, they'll usually, the paediatricians that is, or the paediatric hematologist, will put you on a medication called prednisone or cortisone or steroids, and these are widely used in medicine, and they basically help switch off that immune response so your body's not attacking its own platelet producing cells. The spleen often gets enlarged in ITP because that's where the cells get attacked that make the platelets, so you end up with a large spleen. Spleen's an organ on the left side of your abdomen, up under your ribs. But yeah, that's just a little bit of a workup on ITP. Not that common, but not that uncommon. And if you've got particularly a child or a teenager who's got lots of bruising and bleeding, and you're worried what's going on, get straight off to the doctor, get a blood test done, and it would be probably one of the commoner things that it might come back as that particular condition. Okay, thank you.